cargo thefts are on the rise, how high fuel prices are affecting trucking, and effective supply chain planning. Pull up a chair and join us as the editors of DC Velocity discuss these stories as well as news and supply chain trends on this week's Logistics Matters podcast. I am Dave Maloney. I'm the Group Editorial Director at DC Velocity. Welcome. Logistics Matters is sponsored by Werner. Unlock the power of a seamless connection. Werner Intermodal combines a massive nationwide rail network and cross-border solutions into Mexico with an expanding private fleet and total digital visibility. Secure your capacity today at choosewerner.com. As usual, our DC Velocity senior editors Ben Ames and Victoria Kickham will be along to provide their insights into the top stories of this week. But to begin today, we've been reporting for a couple years now about the ongoing problem of cargo theft in our supply chains. But now we find that criminals are using artificial intelligence to make their fraudulent schemes even more believable than ever. Recently, I spoke with Curtis Spencer, the CEO of Bloodhound Tracking Device. He shared with me about the problems of cargo theft and what shippers and carriers can do to secure loads. Here's our conversation. Thank you, Curtis. Welcome to Logistics Matters. It's good to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, David.
For those not familiar with Bloodhound Tracking Device and IMS Worldwide, can you tell us briefly about your companies and the roles they play in the supply chain?
Yes, sir. I'll start with IMS Worldwide. I started with my dad in that company, setting up foreign trade zones around the United States in 1977. And bought the company in 1990, and we have grown exponentially. Obviously, higher tariffs means higher use of foreign trade zones, and so that's primarily what IMS does, is establish and operate foreign trade zones for a variety of customers, from the very, very large to the medium to the small. And then in that endeavor, I was elected, I've been chosen for be on the COAC committee, COAC committee that oversees Customs and Border Protection and reports to Congress. During that time, 2004 to 2008, we had just come out of the 9/11 shock, and everybody was intent on how to secure the supply chain. So fast forward to 2022, and I got together with a NASA engineer buddy of mine, and we formed a company called Bloodhound Tracking Device, which was intent on being the premier tracker. So we created that using that NASA technology and are in the market today.
Very good. Thank you. And of course, we're here today to talk about cargo theft, and it's a growing problem. Can you elaborate on how cargo theft incidents have increased in the recent years?
Yeah, we track a lot of statistics on your program, as well as in Journal of Commerce, Freightways, et cetera, et cetera. And quite frankly, it's become an epidemic, and the sophistication has become even better. The sophistication of the thieves. So a tracking device on every container or trailer gives the customer and the service provider the ultimate methodology in fighting back against crime. Think of all the latest headline incidents: the theft of the molasses and out of Canada, the theft of the tequila from Guy Fieri's company, the theft of the Apple devices out of a third-party provider's trailer. All of these would have been mitigated and even deterred if there was a unit on each trailer and each container.
So let's back up a moment. What's really driving criminals to steal cargo, and who is doing it? Are they organized thieves groups, or is it just sophisticated hackers? Who's involved in it?
Well, it has morphed. It started out as your typical petty thief who, usually from insider information, knows that the next trailer coming out of this warehouse is going to be filled with iPhones or computers or watches or pharmaceuticals, whatever it may be. The theft, I think, has gotten a little bit more sophisticated because they're targeting higher value product.
What are some of the ways that cargo is being stolen, and are there more prevalent areas of the country where this is taking place?
Yes, sir. Statistics are showing that California, Texas, and Illinois are the highest theft areas in the country. And these thieves are much more organized. It's organized crime, and they're using technology, the spoofing of bill of ladings, putting a legitimate driver with a legitimate set of paperwork at the right location at the right time, but he's taking it to another place. He's taking it to another location that is not the intent of the shipper. And so, quite frankly, it's becoming more and more difficult to ascertain how these thefts are happening and to stop it.
I know we reported recently on organized groups who are actually buying trucking companies who have done freight in the past and are now using
Exactly.
those companies to steal cargo. So, how much is AI, and you mentioned identity theft and impersonation,
Mhm.
how much is artificial intelligence being used to be able to help these companies and these Cs be more successful?
I'm not in those criminal rings, David, but I will tell you that by the fact that AI technology is out there, predictive analytics is what they're using. And predictive analytics tells me if I know where something is made, I know where it has to be shipped to another location for distribution, then I can start having predictive analytics tell me that that truck over there, number 115, is the truck I want to hit. And I think that's what they're using.
Now, there's a term in the industry called container native, and I think you touched on this earlier, where
Sure.
identification is made on the container and on the cargo itself. Can you explain a little bit about what that means and why that's critical for being able to prevent theft?
Yes, sir. And I want you to think of it like this. When auto companies started putting alarms on vehicles, it was an upgrade. It was a want to have. And today, there's not a vehicle out there, I don't think, that has no alarms. They all have alarms. So once that got to be universal in the auto industry, then the thieves had a harder time in snatching cars because the alarms would go off. So I think that we're seeing this container native and trailer native. I think that that push is going to become universal. If we have this conversation in 10 years, we will be talking about what quality there is of the container tracking and the trailer tracking, not the fact of whether it's on there or not. It'll be universal.
Just in a general sense, with not being product specific, but how do these systems work, and how do they help to prevent theft of cargo?
Well, the best of those systems are covert in nature. In other words, you can't tell if it's on the trailer or the container, number one. Number two, it has communications pathways that cannot be obliterated. So if someone can jam your GPS or your cell, then you need to have a backup using SATCOM. And so those are the premier type of products out there. And they literally tie right into a company's TMS, transportation management software, or global transportation management software. All of the import export shippers have some form of TMS, GTM that they use, and tracking devices just API their data right into the TMS. So it's seamless for the customer.
Are there other things that shippers and carriers can do to better protect their cargo, such as just being careful with who they work with? And are there ways to identify to make sure that the people picking up their loads are genuine people who have been assigned those loads?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And part of the freedom we have in transportation due to truck brokerage is the one of the key elements and key pathways that these criminal rings are using to steal cargo. So if I was a large shipper, I would consider having one or two large contracted transportation companies that agreed to use their own assets and not broker down into, Joe Blow that has a trailer and a cab, because that's where you get the problems is mostly in the theft is not as much in the contract carrier realm as it is in the brokered truck realm.
That makes sense. Are there other things people can do to protect their cargo?
Double check all of the documents. I would double check, triple check all documents, all orders for shipping. Take the extra 5 seconds to make the phone call. Hey, we're about to load this trailer and it's going to Indianapolis. Is that jive with what you have on your shipping paperwork? And the company's going to answer yes or no. And then you can double check that as you're getting ready to load.
Makes a lot of sense. Hopefully, some of these preventative measures will limit the amount of cargo theft that we see taking place today. And you're right, it is growing and it's becoming an increasing problem in the freight industry.
100%, my friend. It's an epidemic. It's bad.
We've been talking today with Curtis Spencer. He is the CEO of IMS Worldwide and also Bloodhound Tracking Device. Curtis, we really appreciate your being with us today.
Hey, no problem, sir. Thank you very much.
Now let's take a look at some of the other supply chain news from the week. And Ben, the big story for supply chains this week continues to be the ongoing disruptions caused by the war with Iran. And it seems that nearly after 5 months of back and forth airstrikes, things aren't getting any better there.
Sadly not. Yeah, a few days ago, we saw a temporary ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran come to an end, and freight in the Strait of Hormuz appears now to be pretty much halted again. But even if it were to open tomorrow, most reports we've seen say it would probably be months until ships were sailing and all the backlogs are cleared up. So we talk about all those oil shortages and the high gas prices they cause, but how exactly do they affect the specific sector that we cover at the magazine, trucking and logistics? This week, we saw a report that traced those exact impacts. This came from a quarterly trucking report from AFS Logistics and TD Cowen, which covered pricing in the truckload, less-than-truckload, and parcel transportation markets. And according to Andy Dyer, the CEO of AFS Logistics, the fuel numbers tell the story. In the second quarter, diesel prices rose about 51% compared to January and February levels, and jet fuel prices were up 90% compared to second quarter of last year.
Well, those, of course, are enormous jumps, Ben. So, how did that affect the trucking sector in particular?
Right. So the answer is going to be different for each one of those three different parts of the industry that we mentioned. Starting with truckload, truckload rates jumped to their highest level in the second quarter for 15 quarters. That came despite modest cargo demand, but it was due both to those spiking fuel costs and also to a constrained supply of truck drivers. That's been caused by administration practices and federal regulatory enforcement. Looking at the second one, the less than truckload, the LTL sector, data showed falling weight per shipment, which is a metric that shows how much volume of freight is in the market. And that smaller weight reflects continued softness in industrial and manufacturing demand for U.S. trucking freight. But rates surged anyway. And that's due, of course, to those sky-high diesel prices. So the average LTL fuel surcharge, which is the extra cost charged by truckers to the shippers, in the second quarter rose over 60% above June 2025 levels. So despite those two rises, the parcel segment might look a little different, however. The big reason they have lower price hikes is that parcel is really seeing a new era of competition. One reason is the emergence of alternative carriers, particularly for regional and last mile delivery. The report mentioned OnTrack, GLS, Speedy, VHO, and Uni. Some of these guys are pretty small, pretty regional. I'm not too familiar with some of them, but together they actually more than doubled their volumes from 2024 to 2025. And at the same time, the sector is going to be impacted probably largely by this little company called Amazon, which created Amazon Supply Chain Services recently when they opened up their transportation network to external shippers. And according to the study, that could have meaningful long-term rate implications for the pricing power of the big guys like FedEx and UPS.
Yeah, well, that all makes sense, Ben. And I think the one thing that we've learned is the supply chain managers have been very good at adjusting to the kind of events we're seeing now, kind of events that before COVID would have created total chaos. if it weren't for the resiliency and creativity they now have, and they've learned to adapt and manage their supply chains a lot better because of all of that.
That's certainly true, and we're going to see they're going to get tested and see if they can pull off that magic trick again.
They certainly will.
Yep.
Thank you, Ben.
Glad to.
And Victoria, to continue on that theme, while all the disruptions make it harder to set supply chain plans in place, we still have to make some sort of plan. And you came across some new research that shows what it takes for effective planning.
Yeah, that's right. So this week, the research and advisory firm Gartner released survey data that points to the growing need for flexible supply chain network planning. The company found that 72% of the more than 150 supply chain leaders they surveyed have had to revisit final approvals for network investment decisions at least once, a process that contributes to delays and can also drive up costs and decrease service levels in their supply chain operations. In addition, more than half of those surveyed said they revisited those decisions 3 or more times, which the survey leaders said can lead to lower satisfaction in their final outcome. And just to sort of emphasize or clarify what we're talking about here, network investments, according to Gartner, are those supply chain network design investments that can change the structure or capabilities of a company's supply chain to support business objectives. Those can include things like adding, closing, or repurposing facilities, addressing labor and freight costs, adding supplier sites, or even expanding capacity. So those are the kinds of things we're talking about.
Yeah, that's a pretty broad amount of types of things that people are addressing. So how can companies build in flexibility into those processes?
Yeah, well, so the first step is to distinguish between 2 types of supply chain operating challenges. And Gartner describes those as turbulence and disruption. Turbulence refers to the sort of ongoing expected instabilities that affect a company day to day, fluctuating demand, labor variability, and cost swings that can slow or complicate the flow of goods. Disruption, on the other hand, is like a major unexpected event, a natural disaster, or, some of the things we were just talking about with Ben as well. Those kind of disruptions draw a lot of attention, but Gartner said that it found that it's these day-to-day instabilities that erode margins and more consistently drive up costs. Now, the research offers several steps and approaches to help with this, but essentially it advises companies to put a sharper focus on those everyday challenges and instabilities when it comes to planning. And they reason that, traditionally supply chain leaders have focused on sort of the one-time ongoing costs of a network investment without really incorporating the variable costs associated with managing what Gartner refers to as chronic turbulence. And that's a term I think our listeners can relate to given the economic ups and downs of the past several years, as you pointed out earlier, Dave. So really, the message is to build in flexibility by taking a closer look at how those everyday instabilities affect your business. And Gartner gives some very specific steps on how to do that in this report.
Unfortunately, the turbulence and the disruptions, they do have a price. And it's something we all actually contribute to in paying as consumers and shippers.
Absolutely. It's something you gotta manage and balance.
Right. Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.
We encourage listeners to go to dcvelocity.com for more on these and other supply chain stories. Also, check out the podcast notes section for some direct links to read more about the topics that we discussed today. And we'd like to thank Curtis Spencer of Bloodhound Tracking Device for being our guest. We welcome your comments on this topic and our other stories. You can email us at podcast@agilebme.com. We also encourage you to subscribe to Logistics Matters at your favorite podcast platform. Our new episodes are uploaded on Fridays. And a reminder that Logistics Matters is sponsored by Werner. Unlock the power of a seamless connection. Werner Intermodal combines a massive nationwide rail network and cross-border solutions into Mexico with an expanding private fleet and total digital visibility. Secure your capacity today at choosewerner.com. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Logistics Matters. Be sure to join us. Until then, have a great week.